Bibliophiles of the internet, today I'm here to share a little bit of a haul and show you some recently acquired books. As I've said before, I think book hauls, whether they're books you've bought, borrowed, thrifted, library books, or digital acquisitions, are a great way to discover new books and see what's on other people's radars. I also thought it would be fun to read you the first sentence or two of each book so that you can get a gist of what it feels like, so I will also be doing that. Another good thing about sharing hauls is seeing what excites people, so definitely let me know which of these you think I should read first. To kick things right off, we have Beating Heart Baby by Leo Min. This is a 2022 debut that somehow flew under my radar. First of all, it's queer, and it's about marching band, so I have to read it on that basis alone, but also the tagline describes it as, quote, a love letter to internet friendships, anime, and indie rock. How did I not know this book existed when that's literally describing my life? Anyways, it's about a high school student named Santi who just transferred schools, and everyone in his new marching band is super welcoming except for this one proud, prickly musical prodigy named Suwa who doesn't think that Santi has what it takes. Eventually, they realize that their past experiences actually have quite a bit of overlap, and from there, a very tentative friendship and maybe even romance begins to grow. But their bond might be tested when Suwa decides to pursue a solo spotlight. I had heard about this before, but the first time it actually stuck with me was when I heard Adib Khurram and Julian Winters talking about it as one of their absolute favorite books during this interview they were doing to discuss Julian's most recent book. To see the impact this book had on two of my favorite tender-hearted queer authors was so profound. I didn't even wait for the interview to be over. I just opened another tab and immediately ordered this. And since then, I've seen so many people, especially authors who I deeply respect, citing this as one of their favorite books. The first sentence of this book is very short. It simply says, "Summer's over. Now what?" I mean, I don't know, but I guess we're gonna find out. Next, I wanted this international edition of Tender is the Flesh by Agustina Bastarrica, who is an Argentinian author, and this was translated from the original Spanish by Sarah Moses. This is supposed to be like a gruesome, unsettling, in-your-face blend of horror and dystopia, imagining a society where a highly transmissible and dangerous virus has infected animals, which means humans can no longer consume animal meat. So the government decides to gradually transition towards the legalization of selling and procuring human meat. The story follows Marcos, who actually works in a slaughterhouse. Brutal, I know. And even though contact with the products is forbidden, he receives a rare live specimen and starts connecting with her, which forces him to reckon with what humanity has lost. Listen, I know this book is polarizing. Some people love it, some people hate it. It's very clearly a bold social commentary that's meant to deeply unsettle and provoke. That's not going to be for everyone, and it doesn't have to be, of course, but I think it might just be for me. Quick content warning before I read these first few lines, but while there is nothing graphic actually happening, obviously there's an implication in this context, so feel free to skip ahead to the next book if you would like. Carcass, cut in half, stunner, slaughter line, spray wash. These words appear in his head and strike him, destroy him. But they're not just words. They're the blood, the dense smell, the automation, the absence of thought. Next up, Del Rey continues to be an absolute real one because they sent me a galley of Silvia Moreno Garcia's next book, Silver Nitrate. The tagline describes this as, quote, a dark thriller about a curse that haunts a legendary lost film and awakens one woman's hidden powers. I believe it's set in the 90s in La Ciudad de Mexico, and it's about Montserrat, who's an extremely talented sound editor, but because the film scene is overwhelmingly a boys' club, she's often overlooked. When her childhood friend and first love reveals that his neighbor is a legendary cult horror director, Montserrat gets roped into this director's attempt to finish a film about a Nazi occultist and magic that was never completed. He believes the fact that this film remains unfinished is the reason his career was derailed, so he's hoping that filling in those gaps will lift this curse. But of course, then strange things start happening and Montserrat has to wonder whether magic is actually only the stuff of movies. Obviously, I did not actually need to know a single thing about this besides the fact that it has Silvia's name on the front. That's enough to make me want to read it, but it definitely sounds amazing anyways, which doesn't hurt. The first couple of lines say, an engorged yellow moon painted the sky a sickly amber hue, illuminating a solitary figure. A woman standing between two sycamore trees. Then I was so excited to finally get my hands on a copy of Promises of Gold, also known as Promesas de Oro by Jose Olivares. I have desperately wanted this poetry collection ever since the acquisition was announced. It's described as love poems for the homies, and it's written by a Mexican poet. I literally don't need to know anything else. To quote the author from the Dust Jacket, it says, how many bad lovers have gotten poems? How many crushes? No disrespect to romantic love, but what about our friends? Those homies who are there all along, cheering for us and reminding us that love is abundant. So it's a collection of poems exploring all different kinds of love, self-love, cultural, familial, friendly, and yes, even romantic, from all different angles. And if you flip the book over, those poems are also translated into Spanish. There is an author's note which starts with the sentence, "Despite my best efforts, I am who I am," which is great. But if I flip past that and the translator's note, the first poem, which is called Tradition, starts with these lines. "The stories say Mexicans grew out of the dirt, same as corn stalks." I also wanted to know what it sounded like in Spanish, so here it is. "Las historias dicen que los mexicanos surgieron de la tierra, igual que los tallos de maíz." It sounds better in Spanish. Like, I'm gonna read it in both languages. I love this. Moving right along, Algonquin Young Readers very kindly sent me a finished copy of I'll Take Everything You Have by James Cleese. I had not heard of this before the publicist contacted me, but it's a queer historical coming-of-age story about Joe, who moves to the big city in Chicago to live with his cousin in hopes that he can find work to help save his family farm and pay off his family's crushing debt. So as he starts sending money back home, his cousin lets him in on this get-rich-quick scheme he has going on, where they get hired to infiltrate these French classes that affluent families often attend in anticipation of traveling abroad to France. The idea is that Joe will get to know these people, ask about their trips, and gather information as to when they'll be out of town so he can pass that intel onto someone else who's essentially going to rob their houses. So he's kind of grappling with the morality of that, and he's also meeting new people, being introduced to the underground queer scene in Chicago, and realizing that away from his family, he finally has the freedom to explore who he truly is. The first sentence, which I quite like, says, "At LaSalle Street Station in Chicago, the first thing I did when I stepped off the train was count the tracks, nearly a dozen total, all pointing the same direction. Back toward home." Then, as I said, Del Rey just keeps bringing the heat, because they also kindly sent me a galley of Mortal Follies by Alexis Hall. This is supposed to be a fun, whimsical, historical fantasy. The tagline says, quote, "A young noblewoman must pair up with a rumored witch to ward off a curse in this irresistible sapphic romance." It's set in the year 1814 in a version of the world where fairy spirits, deities, and sorcerers exist. And we're following Malis, who's entering into high society and struggling because she's having to deal with a very annoying curse that causes embarrassment, social faux pas, and other inconveniences. As the curse progresses from innocuous mishaps to more potentially fatal proportions, she finds herself seeking help from Georgiana, also known colloquially as the Duke. There are rumors that she may have murdered her father and brother to inherit their fortune, and also that she's some kind of evil enchantress. But an evil enchantress might be exactly what Malis needs. This sounds fantastic. The author's note that came with this was already hilarious and had me laughing out loud, so I think that's a very promising sign of what we can expect from this book. The opening prologue reads as follows. "Introductions, gentle reader, are in order. I am that knavish sprite that frights the maidens of the villagery. I am Oberon's jester. Was Oberon's jester. That's rather the issue. I am called Hobgoblin by some, and contrary to what certain people might have told you, it is not a name I like, and you shall not have good luck if you repeat it in my hearing. I am also your narrator." Continuing on with review copies, I actually requested a middle grade book called Totally Psychic by Brigitte Martin. This is a Latina middle grade contemporary fantasy story about a Cuban-American girl named Paloma who comes from a family that has psychic gifts. When her family moves from Miami to Los Angeles, she decides it's the perfect time to kick off her own business as a medium by offering readings, hosting seances, and generally networking, especially so she can live up to her abuela's legacy as a celebrity psychic. But then her reading goes horribly wrong, leaving Paloma in a sticky situation with a new friend, and she might just need much more than her family magic to get herself out of this mess. The opening says, "My abuela Gloria had a gift. Not the kind that came wrapped up in a box, but the special kind that a person was born with. And for abuela, that meant the ability to communicate with the dead." Next, I'm going to switch things up with a backlist title, which is this paperback edition of Severance by Ling Ma. This is a sort of dystopian, post-apocalyptic story about a version of our world where a plague of biblical proportions has wiped out almost all of humankind. And our millennial, work-obsessed narrator, Candace Chen, doesn't even notice, and keeps working as she is self-sequestered in her company's Manhattan office. Eventually, she comes across a group of survivors led by a power-hungry IT tech who are heading headed to a place known as the Facility, where they believe they'll be able to restart society somehow. She joins them, but they don't actually know that she's harboring some kind of dangerous secret. This is supposed to be like a satirical, thoughtful examination of millennial working culture, grind culture, all of that stuff. It came out in 2018, but actually kind of had a resurgence of popularity after the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, as you might expect. I picked this one up because Lingma's publisher FSG Books very kindly surprised me with a finished copy of Bliss Montage, which is her latest collection of stories, so I wanted to read Severance before diving into this. So the prologue starts like this. After the end came the beginning. And in the beginning, there were 8 of us, then 9. That was me. A number that would only decrease. Then, in exciting news, one of my dear friends is a bookseller, and he kindly sent me his galley of Spellbound by F.T. Lukens. You don't have to tell me to read this one, I'm actually going to read it very soon, but this is F.T. Lukens' upcoming release. They specialize in delightfully satirical and zany queer SFF, so I'm sure we can expect more of that wonderful trademark style in this. In a nutshell, this story is about 2 rival apprentice sorcerers who have to team up in order to protect their magic. The story follows Rook, who begins working in the office of a powerful sorceress named Antonia Hex, where she runs a call center for magical emergencies. Rook doesn't have magic power himself, but he used to before his grandmother passed away, and that ability or connection was severed for some reason. Antonia entrusts Rook with a spellbinder, which is an illegal magical detection device. And when this governing entity known as the Magical Consortium gets wind of this device, they come for Antonia, and Rook has no choice but to turn to Sun, a grumpy and annoyingly cute rival apprentice. Here's how it starts. Hexagon. The name didn't quite inspire visions of magical greatness. It was a pun, a bad one, but funnily apt for a local emergency on-call cursebreaker. Next, I finally got a special edition of a book I had pre-ordered last year, and that was the Fake Crate edition of Reforged by Seth Haddon. This is actually an indie title that came out last year from a small press. It's written by a queer Australian author, and it's a fantasy romance, potentially a bodyguard romance, about Balin, who is part of the Paladin Order, a group of warriors who are sworn to serve the monarchy and protect it with their lives. Many years ago, he gave up his chance at love to work his way up in that order, but when assassins wipe out the royal family, Balin suddenly finds himself sworn to serve the very man he left behind all those years ago. Assailed by enemies and hidden traitors both within and outside the kingdom, Balin and King Xavrius will have to put aside their differences if they want to root out this corruption and learn how to possibly reforge the trust they once had. First of all, the original cover was already extremely good and extremely gay, but I love this alternate design as well. This is easily one of the prettiest books I own. I might have to insert some footage of all the incredible details. There's really amazing art beneath the dust jacket. There's some amazing gold foiling details embossed on the naked hardback itself, with an instrument on the front and some gauntlets on the back. Plus it came with a signed nameplate and gold gilded edges. All of that beauty aside, chapter 1 starts like this. The moon was full and already at its zenith. He was late. So I'm ready for a good gay time with this. Last but certainly not least, I have this cute little paperback edition of Boyz N the Void, a mixtape to my brother by Jira Asim. It's a nonfiction collection of essays where the author, a millennial academic, is sort of writing to his younger Gen Z brother and creating this mixtape of punk music that's intended to help his brother navigate the intersections and complexities of black masculinity in an ever-changing world. So it's a blend of music writing, cultural criticism, and personal essay as the author uses music as a means to explore class, gender, sexuality, and race. Shout out to my friend Beck, the ultimate nonfiction aficionado, who was talking about this in a reading update, and hearing them talk about it just made me think, wow, that sounds absolutely fantastic. I'm actually going to share the opener for both the introduction and the first chapter because they're both incredible, and in typical Libra fashion, I could not choose. The introduction starts like this. There's a sullen and brooding 6'2", 240-pound presence in my parents' house, and his shadow looms large over the otherwise placid nest. The presence is among the most timeless of American boogeymen, a black male in a state of rapid physical maturation. And the first line of the first chapter says, as Joan Didion famously observed, we tell ourselves stories in order to survive. Again, thank you to Beck for the recommendation. This sounds exactly like my kind of nonfiction, and I can't wait to read it. So those are just a handful of books that have recently come into my life. As I said before, I would love to know which of these you think I should focus on first, and if you have any spoiler-free thoughts you would like to share, I would love to read them down below in the comments. But that is everything I had to share for this book haul today. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, educate yourself, be kind to yourself, take care of yourself, and I will catch you on the flip side of the page.